Hey guys, tonight we're going to turn the pages of history on one of England's most controversial figures, King Henry VIII. Most of us know him as a brutal king, notorious for his 6 tumultuous marriages and the execution of 2 of his wives. But is that the whole story? Can a person be so completely bad that they have absolutely no redeeming qualities? Instead of looking at just one side, let's explore other aspects of this Tudor king. I believe he wasn't a one-dimensional villain, but a complex, multifaceted person with deep motivations behind his most brutal decisions. Let's uncover his 10 good qualities to see that history has more to tell. Let's begin this journey, and I can promise you, there's a 9th good thing about him that will absolutely blow your mind. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, I want to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Asterisk, asterisk. Point number 1. Asterisk, asterisk. Striking handsomeness. Now, as your heavy eyelids long to close and the taste of sleep lingers, let us gently shut our eyes for a moment and imagine a tall young man with an elegant face and a confident gaze. That is Henry VIII in his prime, a true heartthrob of the Tudor court. First and foremost, it must be said that he stood over 6 feet tall, a stature rare in the early 16th century. Such height made him tower above the crowd, leaving a first impression of power and strength. The royal court seemed to bow whenever Henry entered, each of his steps asserting his dynastic authority. Next, consider his radiant, fair complexion, which the Venetian ambassador Sebastian Giustiniani described in his letter of 1515 as a fresh, luminous skin as if suffused by the dawn's own light. Henry's auburn hair was cut short in the French fashion, lending him a modern and distinctive look compared to the more traditional English nobles. His round face, gentle cheekbones, and long, sturdy throat evoked the sense of an ideal visage carved from pearls, so much so that one might mistake it for the face of a stately lady. Moreover, the suit of armour preserved at Whitehall Palace reveals his perfect proportions. A weight of about 15 stone, 95 kilograms, and a 32-inch waist, over 80 centimetres. These figures show a well-balanced physique, neither gaunt nor overly massive, and testify to his vigorous health, no small feat in an age rife with danger and intrigue. The image of Henry in gleaming armour, sword in hand, broad-shouldered, imposing, has been forever etched in the memories of those who beheld him. Many have heard of his later years, when he declined from a leg ulcer, his weight reaching 28 stone, 178 kilograms, and his waist ballooning to over 52 inches, 130 centimetres. But let us for now cast aside that burdened image, close our eyes softly, and return to the early decades of his reign, when his form remained trim, his stride brisk, and his smile as warm as spring sunlight. For nearly 40 years, Henry VIII embodied robust beauty and commanding elegance envied by all of Europe. Remarkably, despite being a much-admired duke, and then the most powerful king in England, Henry still found simple pleasure in combing his hair, draping himself in a soft fur mantle, standing before a mirror to admire his reflection. Morning light streamed through the casement, highlighting his cheekbones and auburn locks, enhancing an almost unbelievable glamour. Portraits from the era show him in a stately pose, yet one cannot hide his natural handsomeness, as if inviting every onlooker to lift their gaze and believe that perfect beauty can indeed exist. For Henry VIII, appearance was not mere vanity but a tool to express power, status, and royal pride. A handsome king easily won the affection of his courtiers, captured the admiration of European princesses, and charmed diplomats from every land. No one dared to dismiss or ignore a monarch of striking looks and solid bearing, for a single raised brow or subtle smile could soothe tensions or stir deep admiration. Thus, when we listen to history's whispers, we see clearly that young Henry VIII was a vivid emblem of masculine beauty in the Renaissance. From his towering height and fair, rosy skin to his auburn hair and perfectly measured physique preserved in armour, each element combined to create a portrait of power and allure. This is point number 1. An aspect that leaves us astonished to think of a king both formidable and dazzling. And though time may dim that splendour, We can still feel the warmth of the man who once shone so brightly in Westminster's courts. Asterisk, asterisk. Point number 2. Asterisk, asterisk. Extraordinary intellect. Now, as the world around you grows quieter and your thoughts drift towards slumber, imagine a grand library in candlelight, rows upon rows of leather-bound tomes, their gilded spines whispering secrets of ages past. In that hushed sanctuary sits Henry VIII, not as a mighty conqueror, but as a scholar, his keen mind roaming freely through the disciplines of history, theology, and classical literature. Indeed, he was no mere dilettante. He mastered 3 tongues: English, French, and Latin, allowing him to absorb texts in their native voices, whether chroniclers of Rome, treatises of the Church, or the epics of antiquity. His private collection rivaled that of many universities, each volume chosen with care, each margin scribbled with his own hand. In winter nights, when the court slept, Henry would lean over vellum pages by the flicker of a single lamp, tracing every phrase, pondering every argument. Such devotion made him a revered presence at banquets, where noblemen and ambassadors gathered. He was not the boorish monarch one might expect, but a conversant who could quote Cicero as deftly as he could regale listeners with insights on the Crusades, or discuss the theological disputes that rippled through Europe. Music, too, flowed through his veins like a gentle current. The lute, its polished wood cool against his fingertips, was his favoured companion. Though he never claimed the genius of the likes of Josquin or Lassus, he composed earnestly. A surviving songbook dated 1518 bears his signature on 20 songs and 13 instrumental pieces. Each melody reflects his mood, sometimes stately, sometimes playful, yet always crafted with the dedication of one who regarded music as both solace and expression. At times, he would retire to a quiet gallery, lute cradled in arms, and let the gentle cadence of notes fill the vaulted space, softening even the hardest edges of courtly life. Beyond strings and woodwinds, Henry turned to verse as another channel for his intellect. Poetry offered him the chance to weave images of chivalry, of lost loves, and of divine musings. His lines may lack the polish of a Petrarch or the brilliance of a Ronsard, but they convey sincerity and a thoughtful mind pondering its own existence. And let us not forget the equestrian arts, an essential discipline when roads were little more than rutted tracks. From infancy he was trained to ride, to feel the horse's heartbeat beneath him, to command the animal with subtle shifts of weight and gentle pressure of calves. By adolescence he possessed an ease in the saddle that few could match. Wherever he journeyed through rolling fields or over cobbled streets, his confident posture and graceful handling of reins announced not only his noble rank, but his mastery of a necessary skill in an era when carriages were a novelty. This broad spectrum of learning and capability shaped Henry VIII into a figure of remarkable depth. He could enter a chapel, genuflect before the altar, and then engage a cleric in spirited debate on scripture. He could slip from serious discourse into the playful banter of a musician among peers, his fingers dancing across strings. He could quote classical poets one moment, and then rally his courtiers to discuss the latest developments in mathematics or astronomy. He was a king in the chapel, a scholar in the library, and an artist in the gallery. By nurturing such talents, Henry earned respect and admiration even from those who found his political actions harsh. They saw that his intellect was genuine, his curiosity boundless, and his appreciation for the arts not merely ornamental. Whether discussing the theological implications of a newly published treatise or composing a sombre anthem on the lute, he brought to each pursuit the same deliberate focus, the same longing for understanding that drives true scholars. And so, as your eyelids grow heavier still, drift into the vision of Henry VIII's world where dusty tomes, soft lute notes, and the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves create a tapestry of erudition and elegance. There, in that twilight realm of memory and imagination, you glimpse the mind of a monarch who wore his crown lightly upon shoulders, invested equally in kingship and knowledge. Thus concludes point number 2, the extraordinary intellect that set Henry apart as a ruler who, even amid the intrigues of court and the demands of power, never ceased to learn, to question, and to create. Asterisk, asterisk. Point number 3. Asterisk, asterisk, passion for sports. Now, as you drift ever closer to the realm of dreams, let your mind wander to a sunlit tilt yard, The air humming with anticipation, this was the world of Henry VIII, a prince for whom athletic endeavour was as essential as royal blood. Born into the Tudor court's gilded halls, he was schooled in physical disciplines from earliest childhood, each lesson forging in him a lifelong devotion to sporting pursuits. Among these, none captivated him more than the martial dance of jousting, that splendid spectacle of courage and skill where mounted knights thundered toward one another with lances poised, each striving to unseat his opponent. Imagine Henry, casque gleaming and armour polished, spurring his steed along the lists. His first recorded tilt came in celebration of his firstborn son's arrival in 1511, when the young prince's christening was accompanied by pageantry and tournament as a dual homage to fatherhood and chivalry. The scene evoked awe, blending the joy of new life with the thrill of martial skill. Years later, in 1524, Henry returned to the lists against Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, and his own brother-in-law. In a slip of fate, he neglected to close his visor, and the blow nearly tumbled him earthward, a reminder that even the mightiest monarch could be humbled when split-second misjudgment intervened. Then came the famed incident of January 1536. Henry, ever enamored with the sport, charged full tilt into a tilt event, only to be unhorsed in a violent clash. Rumour spun tales of brain injury. Attributing his later infirmities to that fall, yet careful scrutiny suggests that while the crash was dramatic, it did not directly inflict the crippling damage often alleged. Instead, it stands as another testament to his zeal, a warrior king unafraid to risk his life for the sheer love of competition. But jousting was merely the crown jewel of his athletic palate. Beyond the lists, he found delight in tennis, so much so that the Whitehall Palace grounds boasted an elaborate tennis court complex, where he and his courtiers could test their agility and precision. The odd bounce of the ball, the graceful follow-through of the racket, the measured steps all appealed to his drive for mastery. When he strode onto the court, robes shimmering, it was not only a sovereign asserting dominance, but an athlete relishing the thrill of sport. Archery, too, drew him in with the promise of deadly accuracy. He practiced the longbow until sinews ached, perfecting his aim on distant targets. In those wooded expanses beyond court boundaries, he would notch arrow after arrow, each strike embedding deep into the target's heart. Hunting, however, elevated his athletic pursuits into a demonstration of regal authority. Towering stag and swift boar alike fell to his skilled bow and sword, and the spoils of the chase became tokens of affection. To Anne Boleyn, the object of his rising passions, he dispatched trophies from his hunts, a living proof of prowess and devotion. Imagine her delight, perhaps tinged with curiosity, as she received the finest specimen of the forest, each antler or pelt a proof of the king's favour. Remarkably, Henry's love of the hunt did not pause, even on the gravest of mornings. On the dawn of Anne's execution, he donned hunting leathers and rode forth with his retinue, tracking quarry beneath skies still pink with sunrise. In those moments, sport and state intertwined inseparably. The king who would decree life or death also sought the simple joy of pursuit in the woodlands. What emerges from these scenes is not the simple portrait of a tyrant ensnared by bloodlust, but an image of a sovereign for whom athletic excellence was integral to identity. Through jousting, tennis, archery, and the exhilaration of the hunt, Henry VIII demonstrated discipline, courage, and an unquenchable thirst for challenge. His prowess bolstered his regal stature. Subjects admired the sight of their monarch mastering dangerous feats, while foreign ambassadors noted with respect his vigorous displays of physical capability. In an age when sedentary luxury might have softened a king's constitution, Henry's commitment to sport kept him fit until well into middle age. He rode with the same assurance that had carried him through youthful tilts. Each tournament, each match, each drive through thicket and glade sustained him, fueling his confidence and reinforcing the narrative of a ruler unbowed by frailty. So let your thoughts drift, as twilight deepens, to Henry VIII at the height of his sporting glory. There, in that golden memory of lance and court and forest chase, you glimpse point number 3, a passion for sports that defined him as both monarch and athlete, a man whose strength of body matched the strength of his ambition. And as your own breathing grows slow, carry with you the echo of spurs on stone and trumpets at dawn, a lullaby for those who cherish the graceful power of play. Asterisk, asterisk, Point number 4. Asterisk. Asterisk. Romantic courtship attitude. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the hush of night envelopes your thoughts, allow yourself to drift into a world where a Tudor king lays down his sword and picks up a quill, not to decree laws, but to compose words of affection. Despite wielding immense power over life and death, Henry VIII embraced an old-fashioned art of wooing, one that spoke through handwritten letters, delicate bracelets set with his miniature portrait, and lavish gifts fit for a queen. His courtship was not a mere afterthought. It was a deliberate performance, equal parts, strategic display, and heartfelt yearning. Consider his pursuit of Anne Boleyn, that dark-haired beauty who ignited both desire and controversy. To draw her closer, Henry did more than whisper flattery. He sent her game from his hunts, plump birds of the forest, their feathers and flesh bearing witness to his prowess and his intention. Each pheasant, each partridge, was more than dinner fare. It was a token of devotion, a symbol that he could provide sustenance and protection, that he would spare no effort to claim her favour. Such gifts spoke in a language ancient as chivalry, inviting Anne into a world where the hunt for love mirrored the hunt in the woods. Though he loathed the tedious business of writing, Henry took up his pen for Anne, and his missives survive in archives far afield, now housed beneath the vaults of the Vatican. In curling script he poured out effusive praise, extolling her wit, her grace, her singular beauty. He confessed longing that even the most lyrical poets might envy, crafting lines that wove bold declarations with subtle appeals to her intellect. With each flourish of ink, he revealed a vulnerability unexpected in a ruler famed for his iron will. When Anne's fortunes waned and she made way for Jane Seymour, Henry's romantic fervour did not fade. He lavished Jane with gold coins, silks trimmed in fur, and necklaces heavy with jewels. Tales whisper of a day when Anne and Jane confronted one another over a bejewelled chain. The king had bestowed a moment of petty rivalry that left Anne's hand marked by a scratch. That drama underscores how passionately Henry invested his heart and his treasury alike in the art of seduction, compelling both ladies to vie for his attentions. His next object of affection, Catherine Parr, found herself on the receiving end of similar generosity. Though she had pledged her hand to Thomas Seymour, Henry sent sumptuous garments embroidered with gold thread, rings of precious stones, and veils of the finest linen. His gifts transcended mere display. They were proclamations of desire and determination, a reminder that he would not be lightly dismissed even by the most prudent of brides. In gifting Catherine, he wove a tapestry of expectation. The fabric of her new gowns bore the weight of his ambition. The sparkle of his jewels mirrored the glimmer of his intent. Yet for all this grandeur, there resided a certain tenderness in Henry's courtship. He understood that romance required more than spectacle. It demanded personal engagement. His love letters to Anne reveal private jokes, references to shared hunts, and invitations to stroll together in secluded gardens. He spoke of moonlit rides and whispered confidences, of days spent in earnest conversation far from the prying eyes of courtiers. There, beneath the shade of yew trees, he imagined confessing his heart without pretense, trusting that her laughter would echo back his own longing. In an age when a monarch might wield his power to command obedience, Henry chose instead to bend his own responsibilities in service of love's pursuit. He granted audiences at odd hours, so that his beloved might receive his tokens in quiet privacy. He postponed council meetings to linger an extra moment within her chamber. Such acts, while trivial to the machinery of state, were monumental in the realm of courtship, demonstrating that even a king could privilege affection over authority. Of course, modern sensibilities may recoil at certain aspects of his approach, his refusal to accept a simple no, or his willingness to employ pressure when his suit met resistance. Yet within that intensity we discern a romantic core, a man not content to rule alone, who sought instead to share his crown with a partner he genuinely admired. His lavish gestures, his love-worn letters, his persistent charm all speak of a sovereign who found in romance a conviction as fierce as any battlefield. And so, as you drift deeper into the twilight of sleep, let this vision of Henry VIII's courtship linger, a tapestry of letters and jewels, of hunts and shared confidences, of regal ceremony and personal devotion. Therein lies point number 4, a testament to his romantic courtship attitude, revealing a monarch who, beneath his velvet robes and crown, was also a lover ready to pluck moonlight into verse and fashion devotion from the spoils of his chase. In that gentle world of whispered promises and gleaming baubles, we glimpse a human heart, earnest and unyielding, questing after love with the same fervour he commanded his realm. Asterisk. Asterisk. Point number 5. Asterisk, asterisk, no coercion of women. Now, as your breathing slows and the boundary between wakefulness and slumber blurs, permit your mind to drift back to Jacobean chambers where courtiers whispered behind velvet drapes about the king's many marriages. Despite Henry VIII's fearsome reputation and the 6 lawful queens and at least 3 famed mistresses who passed through his life, there lies no record of him ever resorting to physical force to compel a woman into his bed. In an era when many a nobleman felt entitled to seize what he desired, Henry's restraint in this most personal arena stands out as a significant, if unexpected, virtue. Imagine the grand procession that brought Anne Boleyn to court, the air thick with gossip that the king intended to render his first marriage null and replace Catherine of Aragon. Though he wielded political and legal might to impose their union, and later to annul it, he did not cross the boundary into bodily violence. When Anne entertained thoughts of escape, fleeing to her family's stronghold at Hever Castle, Henry dispatched agents to bring her back under royal decree. Yet he never forced her into intimacy against her will. The correspondence he penned to her, the vows he pressed upon parchment, all bear the tone of negotiation rather than threat of bodily harm. Similarly, Catherine Parr, whose marriage prospects had once leaned toward Thomas Seymour, found herself under Henry's gaze. His overlordship exerted not through blows or bonds, but through the weight of crown and counsel. Though the king's influence dictated her marital fate, there is no whisper of her being seized or compelled by violence. Even when Thomas Seymour later committed indecorous acts toward Princess Elizabeth, Catherine's stepdaughter, those transgressions belonged to Seymour alone, not to Henry. His authority, while formidable in matters of state and succession, did not extend into the realm of physical coercion in romantic entanglements. This restraint matters more than it might first appear. In 16th century courts across Europe, sexual violence by nobility was lamentably common acts excused as the prerogative of rank. Women, from peasant to princess, often found themselves at the mercy of powerful men. Against this backdrop, Henry's avoidance of such brutality marks a noteworthy divergence. He used the instruments of law, parliamentary acts, royal edicts to achieve his aims, rather than the swaggering intimidation or brute force many monarchs and lords deemed acceptable. Consider the marriage to Anne of Cleves, a union arranged by ministers to secure an alliance. When Henry found her appearance less to his taste, he sought annulment swiftly, yet no chronicler accused him of imprisoning her or inflicting corporal punishment. Instead, they settled terms, granted her a generous jointure of estates, and allowed her to live out her days in comfort, a diplomatic solution rather than a display of physical dominance. Likewise, the fates of Jane Seymour, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr were sealed through charges, trials, and annulments, not literal abduction or assault. Jane's gentle passing after childbirth, Catherine Howard's execution following accusations of infidelity, and Catherine Parr's political rehabilitation each unfolded, according to legal procedure, however draconian by modern standards. Throughout, Henry's hand remained inking decrees rather than brandishing clubs. It is essential to acknowledge that the exercise of political power forcing marriages or demanding obedience can itself feel coercive. Yet the distinction lies in method. Henry invoked the machinery of governance, consulting advisers and clergy, issuing proclamations. He did not seize women by force, or silence their resistance through physical harm. This adherence to procedural authority, however flawed, upheld a baseline respect for bodily autonomy that few peers could claim. Catherine Parr's later writings express gratitude for her favourable treatment, noting that Henry granted her liberty of person, even as he insisted upon her title and duties as queen. Such phrasing underscores his implicit acknowledgement that her consent, however constrained by politics, remained relevant. He did not see her as a mere possession to be manhandled at whim. In reflecting on these truths, we confront the complexity of Henry's character. A king who dissolved monasteries, executed chancellors, and dictated succession with ruthless efficiency could, in his private dealings with women, enforce his will without crossing the threshold into violence. This restraint is no small matter when set against the backdrop of 16th century power dynamics. Thus, as your own thoughts grow hushed and the night cocoon enfolds you, consider point number 5, that Henry VIII, for all his faults and ferocity, did not use physical force to coerce women into intimacy. In an age when might often made right, his choice to rely on legal mechanisms over brute strength marks a subtle beacon of respect for personal agency. And though this virtue may not absolve his harsher deeds, it nevertheless reveals a dimension of his rule where he drew a line that many of his contemporaries dared not acknowledge. As sleep descends, let this measure of restraint linger in your mind, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest histories, small virtues can still shine through. Asterisk, asterisk. Point number 6. Asterisk, asterisk. Unmatched. Generosity. Now, as your thoughts drift gently toward the realm of dreams, picture a grand Tudor court alight with torchlight, and the murmur of eager courtiers awaiting the king's next move. In that hushed anticipation, Henry VIII revealed yet another facet of his complex character, his extraordinary generosity. This was a ruler famed not only for his martial prowess and commanding presence, but also for the lavishness with which he expended his wealth, whether on hunts and feasts or on tokens bestowed upon those he favoured. Consider Catherine Howard, his 5th queen. Upon marrying her, Henry showered her with glittering jewels, necklaces strung with pearls and rubies that caught the light like captured stars, bracelets embossed with gold filigree, and French-style headpieces of velvet and ostrich feather. He clothed her in silks delicate as moonlight and furs soft as dawn's first breath. Among these trinkets was the famed Tudor consort necklace, each link telling of a monarch's desire to impress and protect. Yet though these gifts were dazzling, they served a purpose beyond mere display. By lavishing Catherine with riches, Henry reinforced alliances at court, binding nobles to his favour, and securing political loyalty through tangible symbols of royal benevolence. Then there was Princess Mary, his daughter by Catherine of Aragon. In earlier years, he had compelled her to acknowledge his first marriage's annulment, reducing her to a state of limbo. Yet once Mary's fortunes were restored, thanks in part to the birth of his longed-for son by Jane Seymour, Henry's generosity resurfaced. He presented her with a purse brimming with gold coins, reinstated her royal household, and restored her to the line of succession. This act of largesse, following the earlier estrangement, demonstrates a capacity to soften even the harshest familial ruptures with unreserved material generosity, ensuring Mary's comfort and dignity. Consider also Anne of Cleves, whose brief marriage to Henry was annulled without fanfare. Rather than cast her aside in disgrace, he granted her an unprecedented settlement, a generous annual allowance and possession of opulent estates, such as Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, once the home of Anne Boleyn herself. This arrangement, without equal in Tudor chronicles, allowed Anne of Cleves to live in comfort and retain noble status. Henry's choice here was as much about preserving royal dignity and political stability as it was about kindness. By treating her with respect, he averted scandal and maintained the appearance of a gracious sovereign. Even in matters of marriage among his inner circle, Henry's coffer proved deep. Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk and Henry's brother-in-law, had wed the king's sister without royal consent, an act punishable by death. Yet Henry, in an act of surprising clemency, accepted a hefty fine and then elevated Brandon to the dukedom, bestowing additional titles and lands. This gesture revealed the dual edge of Henry's generosity. He could punish through financial means rather than bloodshed, and then transform that penalty into a reward, effectively binding his friend's loyalty through both challenge and indulgence. Such largesse did not extend to mindless extravagance. Henry's generosity was always calibrated to political ends. Gifts functioned as instruments of diplomacy, tokens of reconciliation, and tools to secure allegiance. He supervised the royal mint, ensuring that coinage maintained its sterling reputation, even as he dispersed wealth among favourites. He financed grand hunts that displayed both his prowess and his munificence. Guests returned from the hunt laden with venison and boar, courtesy of the king's personal muse, reinforcing bonds among his retinue. His feasts were legendary long tables groaning under the weight of roasted fowl, exotic spices and sweet confections brought from Antwerp and Venice. Each banquet was a testament to his willingness to invest in spectacle, to remind friend and foe alike that he ruled a realm of bounty. Yet these occasions were not purely for revelry. They were strategic gatherings where alliances were forged and favours negotiated, the wine flowing as freely as political favours. All this paints a picture of a king who, despite a reputation for fiscal caution compared to his father, embraced a regal extravagance that reshaped the Tudor court. His generosity, whether extolling a queen with jewels or restoring dignity to a wronged princess, marked him as a sovereign who wielded wealth as a form of soft power. It is this generosity, so often overshadowed by tales of tyranny, that constitutes point number 6, revealing Henry VIII as a monarch who recognized the potency of giving and the enduring influence that lavish gifts could secure. And as you slip further into the velvet darkness of sleep, carry with you the memory of those Tudor treasures, pearls that gleamed like moonlit tears, palaces granted as sanctuary, purses of gold heavy, with restored honour symbols of a king whose generosity was as grand as his reign. Asterisk, asterisk. Point number 7. Asterisk, asterisk, devoted husband, in good moods. Now, as the hush of nighttime envelops you and the world grows distant, let us tiptoe into a more intimate corner of Henry VIII's life, his role as husband, a facet often overshadowed by crowns and conquests. Though history remembers him for grand gestures and iron decrees, there were moments rare and gentle when Henry revealed a tender devotion toward his queens, especially during the sunlit interludes of marital bliss. Imagine the winter of 1511 at Greenwich Palace. The infant Prince Henry, longed for by all, drew his last breath only weeks after his birth. Grief cast a shadow over the court, yet Henry rose from his sorrow, not with cold indifference, but with caring compassion. He wrapped Catherine of Aragon in his arms, murmuring words of comfort as she wept, his presence a warm hearth against the chill of loss. In those hushed moments, his sorrow mirrored hers, and he strove to soothe her through gentle counsel rather than royal command. Fast forward 5 winters to 1516, when Catherine carried their hope anew. As the pangs of childbirth approached, Henry's concern blossomed into protective vigilance. He instructed his council to withhold word of her father's death, sparing her the burden of additional grief at a time described as perilous for both mother and child. Such solicitous care, which might seem natural today, was exceptional amid the hard lines of 16th century politics, where the health of a queen was often a pawn rather than a priority. Then came the birth of Princess Mary, a joyous moment tempered by the age's prejudice. Venetian ambassador Sebastian Giustiniani dared to remark that a son would have been preferable, prompting Henry's sharp reply, "We are still young. If this time it be a daughter, by God's grace, a son shall follow." His rebuke shielded Catherine from bitter words, acknowledging both his own hope and her dignity. In that instant, his love for wife and child intertwined, transcending mere dynastic calculation. Later, when Anne Boleyn ascended as queen, Henry's devotion shifted yet again. Despite their tumultuous courtship, he acted with public support. He arranged her splendid coronation at Westminster Abbey, the only queen after Catherine of Aragon to receive such honour, and personally escorted her through the fanfare, ensuring that nobles and foreign dignitaries witnessed her regal standing. His whisper to dignitaries and his written pleas to European courts evinced a husband determined to uphold both her title and her reputation. Consider Catherine Parr, the 6th Queen, whose intellect and companionship won Henry's esteem. In 1545, as he prepared to campaign in France, he did the unthinkable. He entrusted his realm to her care, naming her regent in his absence. This act, placing the kingdom into the hands of a wife, was virtually unheard of among medieval monarchs. It spoke to Henry's respect for Catherine's judgment and his willingness to share authority when confidence ruled the day. Yet let us not mistake these gentler deeds for perfection. Henry's mood swings could plunge his devotion into coldness, and his political necessity sometimes overrode personal affection. But on those rare days when the sun shone upon his spirit, he laid aside the scepter's heft to become a husband whose concern matched his kingly duties. He paused council meetings, lingered by his queen's chamber door, and dispatched gentle messages expressing his longing. He even composed or had composed verses in her praise, each line a reminder that behind the imperial scrolls lay a man capable of affection. In the candlelit privacy of the Queen's private apartments, Henry would slip from ceremonial robes into softer velvets, seeking Catherine's hand and offering solace through quiet conversation. He asked after her comfort, adjusted her pillows, and in some accounts, held her through the throes of labour longer than protocol demanded. These gestures, small as they seem beside statecraft and spectacle, reveal a monarch who remembered the human heart amid the machinery of court. Perhaps the most poignant example came in the weeks before Catherine's own miscarriage in 1518. News reached Henry in council, and he immediately rode to her side, postponing diplomatic duties, his face set with concern. He remained at her bedside through the darkest hours, whispering prayers, pressing her fevered hand, and ordering physicians to attend her every need. In that vigil, the ironclad king and the loving husband merged into one. So, as your own breathing deepens and the edge of sleep draws near, picture Henry VIII in these tender moments, an emperor of nerves and steel, yet capable of genuine warmth for his queens. In these glimpses of marital devotion, we find point number 7, the devoted husband who, when the tides of fate and favour were in his favour, knew how to show compassion, share responsibility, and honour the very lives that gave his rule meaning. Let this vision guide you into the realm of dreams, where even kings lay down their crowns to cradle those they love. Asterisk, asterisk. Point number 8, asterisk, asterisk. Occasionally devoted father. Now, as you drift ever closer to sleep's embrace, envision the grand halls of Hampton Court filled with children's laughter echoing against stone walls. In that moment, you might glimpse a different side of Henry VIII, a father torn between affection and authority, who alternately cradled his offspring in tender arms and wielded his power with uncompromising severity. In the early years of his reign, Henry's love for his children was unmistakable. From their births, each prince and princess was enrolled in an elite royal education, tutored in multiple languages, schooled in music and the lute's gentle chords, trained in martial exercises and swordsmanship, and introduced to the sciences of the day. His illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, was honoured at the tender age of 6 with the title Duke of Richmond, and bestowed with significant responsibilities in the north, a gesture reflecting both paternal pride and dynastic strategy. Patrons of the arts and letters, the king and his queens transformed their court into a cradle of learning. Yet Henry reserved special displays of affection for his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. He delighted in lifting them high for visiting ambassadors. Princess Mary never cried, he would declare, proudly prompting courtiers to whisper that the little princesses were treated more indulgently than their mother. In numerous portraits, the king's broad hand rests gently upon Edward's shoulder, his gaze soft with paternal tenderness. Such images convey a sovereign capable of sincere warmth, a father who relished holding his offspring close and showing them to the world as living emblems of his lineage. But as with much in Henry's life, this devotion existed side by side with a harsher will. When Mary and Elizabeth proved obstacles to his marital plans, Mary for refusing to recognize the annulment of her mother's marriage, Elizabeth for her existence, duly reminding him of Anne Boleyn's fall, they were stripped of rank and banished from court. Historians record that Elizabeth grew so impoverished in the aftermath of her mother's execution that she lacked adequate clothing, forced to borrow or wear hand-me-downs. Those years, dark and humiliating, left scars both material and emotional on the princesses, marking Henry as a father capable of extreme severity when his desires clashed with filial bonds. Yet when Mary and Elizabeth acquiesced, when Mary acknowledged her reclassification as illegitimate, and Elizabeth learned her required place, Henry's paternal generosity emerged once more. He restored Mary to court with a purse of gold, reinstated her household, and returned her to the line of succession, treating her with the same dignity she had once lost. Elizabeth, too, regained her status and privileges, living thereafter in relative luxury and receiving the education he had mandated for all his children. Henry's paternal concern extended beyond titles and fortunes to matters of health and comfort. For the young Edward, he gave precise instructions to his household to maintain immaculate quarters, freshly laundered linens, well-ventilated rooms, and nutritious meals to safeguard the prince's fragile health. Such vigilance underscores a father's anxiety for his son's well-being, an investment of royal resources to ensure that his heir would thrive both physically and intellectually. Thus, in contemplating Henry's paternal legacy, we encounter a figure of dualities. On one hand, he lavished his children with love, education, and protection traits of a devoted parent who sought to equip them for greatness. On the other, He wielded his prerogative to withhold those very privileges when obedience and political convenience so demanded. His daughters endured exile from the court's comforts only to be swiftly recalled when their compliance served his dynastic aims. His sons were raised under tender watchfulness, but also disciplined by a father determined to secure the Tudor line. This yin and yang of affection and authority reveals the true complexity of Henry's fatherhood. He could cradle a babe in his arms and, in the next breath, summon it back to the harsh realities of political necessity. In this blend of warmth and sternness, we find point number 8, the occasionally devoted father, whose love for his children shone through compassion, yet was tempered by the demands of kingship. Let that thought lull you gently toward rest, where dreams may cradle you as tenderly as Henry once held his children. Point number 9, valuing women's education. Now, as your mind drifts toward a gentle dusk, picture the candlelit chambers of the Tudor court strewn with parchment and ink pots, not merely for royal proclamations, but for the exchange of learned discourse between king and queen. In this unexpected realm, Henry VIII reveals a progressive conviction that women, too, deserve the nourishment of the mind. From the earliest days of his reign with Catherine of Aragon, Henry recognized the intellectual gifts of his beloved consort. Catherine spoke fluent Latin and Spanish, steeped in theology and classical literature from her years at the Aragonese and Castilian courts. Her erudition offered Henry fresh perspectives on canon law and diplomatic nuance, gems of wisdom he might never have glimpsed without her guidance. He welcomed her counsel on matters of state religion, and even allowed her a voice in high-level discussions, an honour rare for queens of 16th century Europe. When Anne Boleyn captivated the king's heart, Henry did not abandon his principle. Anne had spent formative years in France and the Low Countries, mastering French, Flemish, and reading Latin texts with ease. She dazzled at court debates, quoting scripture and classical authors to win admiration. Henry prized her eloquence so highly that he pushed for her coronation at Westminster Abbey, ensuring that her status as a learned queen would be visible to the realm. In doing so, he signalled that a woman's sharp mind was as worthy of veneration as her beauty and lineage. By the time Catherine Parr entered Henry's life, he had established a pattern: choose a wife whose wit matched her charm. Parr, already a published author, engaged Henry in theological debate, sometimes perilously close to the era's heresy trials. Yet he defended her right to express her views, permitting her works to bear her own name, an almost revolutionary act for a woman in the English 16th century. Through this support, Henry affirmed that a queen's intellect could stand in public view, challenging conventions that relegated noble women to silence. Contrast this with his third and fourth marriages, which lacked the same scholarly foundation. Jane Seymour, while gracious, did not possess Catherine's diplomatic polish or Anne's cosmopolitan erudition. The imperial ambassador Eustace Chapuis labelled her not very learned, a harsh slight reflecting her less rigorous upbringing. Anne of Cleves, too, spoke little English and had led a sheltered life. The language barrier hindered meaningful conversation. Their brief unions underscore Henry's preference. Beauty alone could not bind him. He valued minds that could meet his own in discourse. Even Catherine Howard, his fifth queen, owed her selection more to youth and vivacity than to depth of learning. She had mastered courtly grace, but remained unversed in classical education. Their marriage's swift demise hints at Henry's restless search for an equal partner in intellect. In each instance, he demonstrated that intellectual compatibility mattered almost as much as political alliance. Beyond his queens, Henry's support extended to his daughters. Mary and Elizabeth received an education unmatched among European princesses. They studied Greek, mathematics, theology, and the liberal arts, guided by tutors drawn from the continent's finest universities. This investment bore fruit when both would later ascend the throne as effective, learned monarchs who drew on their vast knowledge to govern with insight. Historians agree that without Henry's insistence on their scholarly training, Mary and Elizabeth might never have become the formidable rulers history remembers. Henry's approach set him apart from many of his contemporaries. While other sovereigns married wives for dowry or pedigree, Henry sought minds a partner who could advise, challenge, and enrich his own rule. His court became a centre of humanist learning, where women spoke alongside men, where theology and politics intertwined with poetry and philosophy. In doing so, he elevated women's status within the court and, by extension, in Tudor society. And so, as sleep beckons with whispered lullabies, reflect on point number 9, Henry VIII's enlightened stance on women's education. In a world where many rulers dismissed learned ladies as distractions, he championed their intellect, inviting them into dialogue and granting them authorship. Through Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Catherine Parr, he forged a legacy that extended beyond lineage, a conviction that the female mind, like the male, yearns for knowledge and deserves to shape the course of history. Let this thought drift with you into slumber, a testament to a king who, amid grand ambitions and stern decrees, still held space in his court and heart for the power of women's learning. Asterisk, asterisk. Point number 10. Asterisk, asterisk. Love of country and quest for stability. Now, as the evening draws its silken curtain and your thoughts slow to a gentle rhythm, allow yourself to drift to the windswept cliffs along the English coast, where Henry VIII, despite the storm he had unleashed through the dissolution of the monasteries, harboured a deep devotion to his realm and a burning hope for its enduring stability. Beneath the thunder of political upheaval lay a sovereign who, for all his personal ambitions, sought above all to secure a peaceful Tudor succession and spare England the spectre of internecine war. Recall the tumult of the Wars of the Roses, when rival houses spilled blood across green fields for claims to the throne. Henry's heart pounded with the memory of that fractious age, when kings and lords vied for power with blade and betrayal. From his earliest days, he understood that a male heir was more than mere pride. It was a bulwark against another descent into chaos. His first marriage to Catherine of Aragon endured years of devotion, but bore no surviving son. When it grew clear she could not provide the needed male issue, Henry faced a dire choice. Some counselled patience await Catherine's demise, and wed again, but the timeline troubled him, as did the risk that Mary, his daughter, might ascend and provoke foreign intervention from Spain. Others whispered of more extreme measures against his queen, but Henry balked at shedding more royal blood. Rather, he pioneered a different path, the annulment of his marriage and the breaking of Rome's spiritual bonds. In seeking his freedom to wed Anne Boleyn, he ignited the English Reformation, severing ties with the papacy to place authority in his own hands. This seismic shift dissolved centuries of monastic tradition, redistributed vast lands and wealth, and shook the foundations of English spirituality. Yet at its core lay Henry's relentless desire for a secure male successor. When Anne failed to deliver that gift, he turned swiftly to Jane Seymour, his third queen, whose bearing of a son at last thrilled him with hope. Through these personal dramas, Henry's true motive emerged. A king determined to forestall any repeat of the civil strife that had plagued his forebears. He weighed alternatives, elevating Mary to the throne and accepting the risk of foreign meddling, or legitimizing his acknowledged bastard, Henry Fitzroy, but found each fraught with peril. The memory of Empress Matilda's ill-fated bid for power in the 12th century haunted his judgment, counselling caution against a queen regnant. Thus he embraced annulment and remarriage as necessary evils, believing them lesser risks than a contested female succession. But Henry's love of country extended beyond dynastic security to matters of defence and naval power. Ever mindful of threats from France and the Holy Roman Empire, he poured resources into England's fleet, commissioning new ships with reinforced hulls and heavy artillery. He strengthened coastal fortifications, from Dover to Portsmouth, ensuring that any hostile armada would face impenetrable walls and vigilant garrisons. His reforms professionalised the navy, laying the groundwork for what would become England's mightiest armada under Elizabeth I, an enduring legacy born from his foresight. On land, too, he reorganised the militia system, instituting training programs so that common levies could muster swiftly in times of crisis. He invested in gunpowder and artillery workshops, recognising that the thunder of cannons might deter invasion better than any castle keep. These measures, while expensive, reflected a sovereign's love for his people, a desire to shield them from foreign incursion and internal rebellion alike. In diplomacy, Henry balanced alliances with prudence. He negotiated marriages across Europe, forging ties with France and the Habsburgs when expedient, yet never losing sight of England's interests. His treaties often included clauses for mutual defence, signalling to continental powers that England would not be an easy prize. Even as he clashed with Pope and Prelate, he maintained a vision of England not as a pawn in greater games, but as a kingdom deserving respect and autonomy. Thus, Though driven by ego and occasional ruthlessness, Henry VIII's actions reveal a sovereign truly devoted to his realm. His reforms in church and state, his relentless pursuit of a male heir, and his vast investments in the navy and fortifications all converge on a singular aim: to secure a stable, potent Tudor dynasty and protect England from the skirmishes of European power politics. So, as your own breathing deepens and the night enfolds you in its quiet promise, let point number 10 linger in your mind, the love of country and quest for stability that animated Henry VIII even amid his most contentious decisions. In this final hue of his complex portrait, we see not only a monarch bent on personal desire, but a ruler who, above all, longed to leave behind a peaceful and enduring legacy for England. Let that thought guide you into peaceful slumber, where the very stones of Dover stand guard in dreams, echoing the watchful heart of a king who cherished his nation's future. As we've traced the 10 commendable qualities that made Henry VIII a three-dimensional figure, his striking handsomeness, scholarly mind, athletic zeal, romantic flair, respect in personal relations, lavish generosity, occasional devotion to family, encouragement of women's learning, paternal complexity, and enduring love for his realm. Let us now turn from these personal virtues to the mark he left on England itself. In an age of dynastic strife and shifting alliances, Henry's reign reshaped the island kingdom's very foundations. What follows are 5 pivotal contributions he made to strengthen, modernize, and elevate England each, a testament to a monarch whose ambitions reached far beyond his own court. Asterisk, asterisk. Point for the country number 1. Asterisk, asterisk. Building a powerful navy. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the hush of evening settles in, let us drift together to the misty docks of Tudor England, where the wooden hulls of fresh-built warships rock gently in the twilight. In those days, Henry VIII recognized that an island kingdom's true strength lay not merely in its armies or royal court, but in the vessels that patrolled its coasts and charted distant seas. So he set about forging a navy that would come to stand as the very backbone of England's security and future might. Imagine the great shipyards at Woolwich and Deptford, alive with the rhythm of hammers upon iron and the smell of tar and pine. There, under Henry's watchful eye, master shipwrights assembled hulking carracks and sleek galleons. These vessels were more than floating palaces. They were instruments of defence and projection of power, their decks bristling with the latest cannon and armed men. The king invested lavishly in hull design, seeking innovation that would allow his ships to outmaneuver and outgun any rival fleet. Each keel laid was a promise that England would no longer cower beneath the shadow of continental navies. Henry did not merely commission new ships. He reformed the very organisation of England's maritime forces. He established what would become the Royal Navy, a permanent, professional fleet rather than the ad hoc levies summoned in times of crisis. Sailors and gunners were recruited, trained, and paid regularly, an extraordinary step in an era when naval service was often haphazard and short-lived. By ensuring that vessels were crewed by skilled and disciplined men, Henry created a standing force capable of rapid response to threats from the Channel to the North Sea. But these reforms extended beyond men and ships. Henry recognized that ports must be fortified to withstand attack. He ordered the construction and reinforcement of coastal forts, erecting stout stone bastions at key harbours. At Dover, he enhanced the existing castle to guard the narrowest stretch between England and France. At Portsmouth, he built new defences to safeguard the fleet's principal anchorage. These fortifications, while silent during peace, stood ever vigilant against the drumbeats of invasion. Their presence alone sent a clear message that England would defend its shores with determined resolve. And so, when threats did arise, whether from French armadas or Spanish corsairs, England could summon more than 1,000 ships, arranged in disciplined squadrons, ready to meet any foe. Henry's enhancements in naval artillery ensured that English cannons were both lighter and more accurate than many European designs, allowing his ships to deliver devastating broadsides. These innovations would echo down the decades, eventually empowering England to triumph over the Spanish Armada under Elizabeth I. Yet Henry's vision did not end with war. He understood that commerce, too, thrived under the protective wing of a strong navy. With patrolling ships discouraging pirates and privateers, Merchant vessels could ply the seas more safely, carrying wool, tin, and cloth to far-off markets. This security fostered trade agreements and encouraged English merchants to venture into new waters, laying the groundwork for the nation's burgeoning maritime empire. In quieter moments, Henry might have watched the assembling fleet from the Tower of London, the melodies of shipyard whistles mingling with the distant roll of waves. He likely contemplated how each newly launched galleon represented not just wood and iron, but the hopes of a kingdom that would rise above its insular past and claim its place among Europe's seafaring powers. And so, as your breathing slows and the world outside slips further into dream, hold fast to this vision of Henry VIII's greatest contribution to his country, a navy moulded by royal ambition and forged in the shipwright's forge, standing sentinel over England's shores. Through his determination, England would become a nation defined by its mastery of the sea, a legacy that would carry Tudor ambitions to every horizon. Thus concludes point for the country number 1, the building of a powerful navy, a cornerstone of security and prosperity that would grant England both safety from invasion and the means to navigate the world's wide oceans. Let this thought guide you into restful sleep, with the sound of distant seagulls and creaking timbers echoing softly in your dreams. Asterisk. Asterisk. Point for the country number 2. Asterisk. Asterisk. Reforming finances and the royal treasury. Now, as your eyelids grow heavier and the world outside quiets to a gentle hush, let us drift into the dimly lit corridors of the Tudor exchequer, where coins clink softly in ledger chambers and parchment scrolls whisper of royal coffers. It was here, within these vaulted rooms, that Henry VIII set about a comprehensive reform of England's finances, an undertaking as vital to the realm's stability as any battlefield victory. In those early years of his reign, Henry recognized that royal revenue depended heavily on ancient customs and feudal dues, many of which had grown outdated or were simply evaded by wealthier subjects. So he commissioned a review of customs duties at the ports, ensuring that imported wine, cloth, and grain were taxed, according to new schedules' fairer rates, that nonetheless filled the royal purse more reliably. By standardizing tariffs and closing loopholes, he stemmed the flow of illicit trade and replenished the treasury. In quiet meetings with his financial advisors, he would pore over tables of rates and exemptions, seeking the balance between encouraging commerce and preserving crown income. But reforms extended beyond duties alone. Henry overhauled the ancient exchequer system, tightening controls on accounting and auditing. Where once sheriffs and local collectors might skim from miscounted tallies, new procedures mandated double audits and strict record-keeping. The king ordered that all sheriffs submit their accounts annually, subject to scrutiny by royal clerks. Those found to have misappropriated funds faced severe penalties, deterring would-be fraudsters. In these corridors, the tapping of quills became a deterrent against corruption, each entry a testament that the crown would no longer tolerate shadowed treasuries. Then came perhaps the most transformative measure, the dissolution of the monasteries. When Henry severed England's ties with Rome, he seized vast monastic lands and properties. At first, these acquisitions seemed merely a windfall, but Henry moved swiftly to convert them into revenue. Some estates were sold to nobles and gentry, binding them to his cause through new landholdings. Other lands remained crown property, generating rents and agricultural incomes that regularly flowed into royal coffers. Even the lead from monastic roofs and the timber from cloistered precincts found new sale to carpenters and builders, adding still more coin to the exchequer. These measures, though controversial, reshaped England's fiscal landscape. The influx from former church assets allowed Henry to fund his armies, fortify ports, and underwrite his navy investments that might once have bankrupted less bold predecessors. Moreover, by distributing monastic lands to loyal subjects, he fostered a new class of Protestant-leaning landowners, thus securing both revenue and political support. Each deed signed by the king was a promise that the wealth once hidden behind abbey walls would now serve the nation's future. Yet Henry did not proceed recklessly. He established the Court of Augmentations, a dedicated body to manage former monastic revenues. This body oversaw rents, leases, and sales, ensuring that the crown derived consistent income without overburdening tenants. Through such specialized administration, Henry prevented his own treasury from becoming a chaotic repository of scattered assets. The court's clerks worked in near silence, their scribbled notes a lullaby of efficiency, as they catalogued every rood of land and recorded each incoming penny. Long after Henry's reign waned, and his own coffers were exhausted by wars and extravagances, the structures he put in place endured. The standardized customs system continued to enrich the exchequer, while the lands once held by monasteries remained productive sources of rent. The reforms to accounting laid the groundwork for modern financial administration. England's steady fiscal footing in the later Elizabethan era owes much to Henry's insistence on transparency and accountability. And so, as you drift towards sleep, imagine the hush of those treasury halls, the shifting of coins, the quiet scratch of quills marking each transaction. Picture Henry, torch in hand, reviewing ledgers late into the night, his mind weaving strategies to sustain his realm. Through customs reform, tighter audits, and the transformation of monastic wealth, he forged a stronger financial foundation for England, one capable of supporting naval fleets, garrisons, and the grand ambitions of a rising power. Thus concludes point for the country number 2, the reforming of finances and the royal treasury, a legacy of prudent management and daring redistribution that underpinned England's emergence as a stable, well-funded kingdom. Let this echo in your dreams as a melody of measured coins and secure ledgers, guiding you into a restful night. Asterisk, asterisk, point for the country number 3, asterisk, asterisk, promoting foreign trade and diplomacy. Now, as the gentle hush of evening settles around you and thoughts begin to drift like autumn leaves, imagine the bustling quays of Tudor England, where merchant vessels unload bales of cloth and barrels of wine. In this world of rising commerce, Henry VIII recognized that England's prosperity depended on open markets and wise alliances. Thus, he embarked on a mission to expand foreign trade and cultivate diplomatic ties, laying the groundwork for an island nation that would one day span the globe with its commerce. First, consider the trade treaties Henry negotiated with continental powers. He concluded agreements with the Burgundian Netherlands, securing lower tariffs on English wool and cloth exports. Merchant caravans from London could now traverse Flanders with greater ease, their wares sold at fairer prices, while English clothiers found new markets for their fine broadcloth. At the same time, he strengthened ties with the Hanseatic League, that confederation of northern German cities, by granting privileges to their merchants in London's steel yard. In return, English traders gained better access to Baltic timber, furs, and pitch materials, vital for shipbuilding and naval stores. In France, Henry leveraged both diplomacy and marriage. His own union with Princess Mary of France, though short-lived, opened doors for English merchants in Breton and Gascon ports. He arranged commercial undertakings whereby English ships could carry French wine back to English taverns, while French merchants plied their wares in London markets. Even when political tensions with France flared, Henry often chose negotiation over outright hostility, ensuring that trade continued and that both realms benefited from the exchange of goods and ideas. Across the sea to Scandinavia, Henry sponsored voyages of exploration and trade. He granted charters to mariners such as Sebastian Cabot, encouraging searches for new routes to Asia and untapped markets in the New World. Though the riches of the Orient proved elusive by northern seas, these enterprises fostered a spirit of enterprise. English ships began to venture farther, returning with furs, spices, and tales of lands beyond the horizon, embryonic steps toward the later East India and Muscovy companies. Henry's diplomacy extended to the Holy Roman Empire as well. He negotiated with Emperor Charles V, balancing religious and political interests with the promise of commerce. Through careful envoys and gift exchanges, jewels and tapestries for ambassadorial goodwill, he maintained open channels that allowed English clothiers and mercers to trade in Antwerp and Venice. These Mediterranean connections enriched England's coffers and introduced innovations in banking, bookkeeping, and merchandise that would transform English markets. Recognizing the power of dynastic bonds, Henry arranged marriages to cement alliances that benefited trade. The marriage of his sister Mary to Louis XII of France, though personal, carried enormous commercial implications. English merchants found themselves welcomed at the French court, while French silks and luxury goods flowed more freely into London. Later, his own marriage to Anne of Cleves was designed to align England with the Protestant states of Germany, encouraging trade routes northward and offering English merchants protection in the markets of the Rhineland. While the marriage itself proved short, the diplomatic overture eased barriers for English traders on the continent. Even when Henry turned inward with religious reforms, he did not sever England from foreign commerce. Instead, he established admiralty courts to adjudicate maritime disputes, ensuring fair treatment of English and foreign merchants alike. He granted licenses for privateers to seize enemy ships in times of war, providing both a measure of security for English shipping and an incentive for seafaring entrepreneurs. In this way, he balanced protectionist measures with open opportunities, guiding the kingdom toward a robust mercantilist ethos. Under Henry's reign, customs houses were modernized, and merchant guilds received royal charters, giving them legal standing and standardized regulations. English clothiers and haberdashers organized themselves to resist unscrupulous middlemen, while handsomers and scriveners developed forms of credit and bills of exchange that eased cross-border transactions. Each innovation, small though it might seem in isolation, contributed to a more fluid and prosperous trade network. So, as your breathing slows and the day's last murmurs fade, picture the Tudor docks alive with activity sailors heaving ropes, dock workers guiding livestock ashore, merchants tallying accounts by lantern light. Recall Henry VIII's vision to transform England from a land-locked feudal realm into a trading power whose ships would one day round the globe. Through treaties, charters, marriages, and maritime law, he sowed the seeds of England's mercantile empire. Thus concludes point for the country number 3, the promotion of foreign trade and diplomacy, a legacy of open markets and strategic alliances that would carry England forward into an age of unprecedented wealth and influence. Let this thought guide you into restful sleep, where the creaking of wooden hulls and the promise of faraway lands lull you into gentle dreams. Asterisk, asterisk. Point for the country number 4. Asterisk, asterisk. Supporting science, technology, and innovation. Now, as the world around you hushes and the pull of slumber beckons ever closer, let us drift into the flickering lamplight of a Tudor workshop where wood smoke mingles with the tang of heated metal, and Couch's experiments churn in curiosity's quiet pursuit. Under Henry VIII's reign, England saw the gentle stirring of scientific inquiry and technological advancement, a subtle transformation that, though rarely sung in ballads, would echo into future centuries of innovation. Henry recognized that mastery of the seas and strength on land required more than valor. They demanded knowledge. Thus, he looked beyond tradition to nurture fields of study that touched navigation, astronomy, and warfare. In the shadowed corners of royal institutions, he patronized scholars who charted the stars and measured tides. Under his aegis, navigators learned to calculate latitude by the angle of the sun, a skill vital to guide ships beyond familiar coasts. These lessons, taught in hushed workshops, sowed the seeds of England's later maritime exploration. Meanwhile, the royal dockyards became crucibles of technical ingenuity. Henry commissioned new forms of artillery, lighter cannon barrels forged from bronze and iron, capable of hurling heavier shot with greater accuracy. Smiths heated metal in roaring furnaces, pounded by hammers and cooled in oil, each piece refined for strength. Gun carriages were redesigned to absorb recoil, letting gunners fire more swiftly and reload with ease. In this forge-born ballet of sparks and smoke, England's warships gained the edge, their broadsides thunder echoing demands of respect across every sea. On land, Henry championed the manufacture of small arms, granting patents to inventors who devised early handheld firearms. Though primitive, these handguns would evolve into muskets that redefined battlefields. Armorers experimented with matchlock mechanisms, delicate triggers that, once perfected, offered infantry a new way to wield explosive power. Each barrel tested, each lock refined, spoke of a monarchy willing to invest in the future of its armies, rather than depend solely on medieval pike and blade. In the quieter realm of the mind, Henry supported the spread of the printing press. He granted licenses to printers and scholars, encouraging the production of scientific treatises and technical manuals. Through these printed pages, knowledge of mathematics, cartography, and anatomy moved beyond cloistered circles to reach merchants, surgeons, and shipwrights alike. The steady hum of the press became a lullaby of learning, each sheet an invitation to wiser minds across England. Henry even established a study of the seas within royal circles, bringing together mariners, mapmakers, and clerics to discuss voyages and chart unknown waters. Here, charts were drawn by candlelight on vellum, annotated with depth soundings and notes on prevailing winds. In time, These charts guided expeditions, their accuracy the fruit of Henry's quiet patronage. Mariners would speak of smoother passages and fewer shipwrecks, tipping their hats to a king who valued safe travel as much as plundered treasure. Beyond naval science, Henry encouraged agricultural innovations. He permitted landowners to experiment with new crop rotations and drainage techniques, quietly transforming marsh into fertile fields. Engineers built watermills and windmills with improved gear assemblies, increasing flour yields to feed a growing population. These advances, though humble, strengthened the kingdom's self-sufficiency, reducing famine's reach and bolstering the crown's revenue. In the realm of medicine, Henry gave support to physicians who studied herbal remedies and anatomical texts. He authorized the collection of medicinal plants for royal apothecaries, and his court physicians exchanged insights with their counterparts in Italy and France. Though constrained by the era's limited understanding, these efforts nurtured a foundation for later breakthroughs in surgery and pharmacy. All these endeavors, naval innovation, advanced weaponry, the printing press, agricultural experiments, and medical study, sprang from Henry's willingness to look forward rather than backward. He saw that a realm's glory rests not only on conquests but on the steady progress of knowledge and skill. By offering patronage and protection to inventors and scholars, he kindled the spark of England's scientific awakening. And so, as the hush deepens and your breathing slows, imagine those Tudor workshops and study chambers where lamplight glanced off bronze and vellum. Recall Henry VIII's quiet role as fosterer of progress, a sovereign who, even amid courtly pageantry, valued the subtle alchemy of discovery. Thus concludes Point for the Country number 4, supporting science, technology and innovation, a legacy that would, in time, fuel England's rise as a beacon of enlightenment and invention. Let this gentle vision guide you into dreams of whirring gears and turning pages, where tomorrow's breakthroughs quietly slumber until morning's first light. Asterisk, asterisk. Point for the Country, number 5. Asterisk, asterisk. Strengthening the legal and administrative framework. Now, as the hush of night deepens and your eyelids grow ever heavier, imagine the vast halls of Tudor England's governance, where quills scratched softly on parchment and whispered deliberations shaped the fate of counties and shires. It was Henry VIII who, weary perhaps of scattered feudal allegiances, set his mind to forging a more unified, efficient system of law administration so that justice might flow more evenly and the Crown's authority stand unchallenged. In the centre of his reforms stood the enhancement of the royal courts. The ancient Court of King's Bench and the Court of Common Pleas, once clogged with local disputes handled haphazardly, were systematically improved. Henry appointed learned justices of the peace, men versed in statute and custom, who travelled the kingdom in circuits to hear cases and apply uniform rulings. By insisting on regular sessions and clearer procedures, he helped transform sporadic justice into a more predictable and orderly process. The echo of their gavel, though muffled by the stone walls, became a steady metronome of law upheld. Simultaneously, Henry established the Court of Star Chamber, a body convened in the royal palace to address cases that local judges could not manage, particularly those involving powerful nobles. Here, intimidation and bribery found little foothold, as the king's own councillors sat in judgment, their robes rustling as they weighed evidence and testimony. The threat of the Star Chamber's swift verdict discouraged violent feuds and private vendettas, reminding all that the Crown's reach extended even to the mightiest of peers. Its very existence served as a lullaby of order, soothing the fears of commoners that no man stood above the law. At the same time, Henry saw that governance far from London demanded clearer guidance. He issued statutes delineating the responsibilities of sheriffs, mayors, and borough councils. These laws prescribed how taxes must be assessed and collected, how markets were to be regulated, and how poor relief should be administered. By codifying such rules, he reduced the opportunities for local magnates to exploit their neighbours or pocket surpluses for personal gain. The parchment scrolls bearing royal seals became beacons of uniformity, each clause promising that administration would no longer depend on the whims of a particular magistrate. Henry's reforms also curtailed the power of fractious barons by centralising authority. Where once lords held private courts in their manors, judging tenants without oversight, he forbade such arbitrary tribunals when they conflicted with royal law. Manorial courts continued to adjudicate minor disputes, but their decisions could be appealed to the king's justices. This shift strengthened the crown's position, ensuring that a peasant wronged in some hamlet might, if need be, carry his grievance into the royal courts, an unheard-of reassurance to those who once feared local tyranny. In the dusty chambers of Chancery, Henry's chancellors refined the issuance of writs and patents, streamlining the paperwork that underpinned legal actions. They introduced more standardized forms, reducing confusion and delay. Land transactions, inheritances, and grants of title moved with greater swiftness, each signature and seal a step closer to orderly governance. The rustle of vellum records, each entry in careful script, became a lullaby of continuity, preserving rights and obligations for generations to come. Beyond law, Henry invested in administrative offices that would endure long after his own reign. The council learned in the law, once informal, became a permanent body advising the monarch on revenue and legal matters. Its clerks, perched at their desks by candlelight, calculated fines and fees, ensuring the crown received its due without overstepping legal bounds. The Privy Council, too, expanded its remit, coordinating between various departments so that policy edicts from the king flowed smoothly to the provinces. Their hushed consultations in the early hours kept the machinery of state humming, a lullaby of governance well-oiled. In tandem, local governance gained new structure through the improvement of the office of Justice of the Peace. These local magistrates, often drawn from the lesser gentry, were empowered by statute to maintain public order, supervise roads and bridges, and oversee the care of the poor. Their annual meetings, held by county courts, ensured that every corner of England felt the steady hand of the Tudor crown. The soft murmur of villagers seeking relief or justice at the sessions reinforced the sense that the law was not an abstract concept, but a living presence in daily life. And so, as you drift into sleep's embrace, envision these interconnected layers of courts and councils, each playing its part in a symphony of law and administration. Recall Henry VIII's quiet determination to bind a fractious realm into a cohesive whole, where justice was neither capricious nor distant, but administered with more predictability and fairness. Thus concludes point for the country number 5, the strengthening of the legal and administrative framework, a legacy of order and uniformity that laid the groundwork for England's modern governance. Let this image of parchment, ledger, and solemn robes guide you gently into dreams, where every law is applied and every subject, high or low, rests assured beneath the crown's watchful care. And now, as the last echoes of our journey through Henry's life and legacy begin to fade, let us slow the pace of our thoughts to a gentle rhythm. Calm your breath. Feel the weight of each syllable settling like soft petals upon the heart of the evening. In these final moments, allow the story's message to drift into the quiet spaces between your thoughts, an enduring testament to the power of foresight, compassion, and the steady hand of thoughtful leadership. What we have truly explored is not merely the deeds of a single king, but the idea that even the mightiest among us can choose to build rather than destroy, to innovate rather than stagnate, and to balance strength with kindness. In Henry's world of grand ambitions and sweeping reforms, we find a reminder that progress often grows from careful planning, that courage can take the form of improving systems as much as winning battles, and that true legacy resides in the structures and values we leave for those who follow. As these gentle reflections mingle with the hush of the night, picture the soft glow of candlelight dimming down the corridors of power, the parchment rolls drifting to rest, the waters of the Solent lapping quietly against the hulls of once proud vessels. See the final tendrils of smoke curling from the forge where cannon were born, now cooled, the last quill stilled upon the council table. Let these images fade slowly, like distant stars losing their brilliance in the dawn's approach, until only a soft afterglow remains a memory of effort and intention, of ambition tempered by care. In the rising stillness, may you feel reassured that the world, like Henry's England, when guided by prudence and vision, can find its way towards stability and hope. Hold close the lesson that every act of generosity, every reform of law, every ship launched, and every charter granted, contributed in its small way to the unfolding story of a nation's resilience. Let this truth settle gently into your thoughts, carrying you toward a peaceful rest. And now, as the final curtain of night descends, allow your mind to drift beyond the realm of Tudor courts and royal edicts into the comforting warmth of dreams. Know that here, in this quiet sanctuary, the values of foresight, compassion, and dedication endure, whispering their gentle promise that tomorrow brings new chances to build, to learn, and to care. Sleep well, dear friend, wrapped in the soft embrace of history's tender lessons. When you awaken, may you carry with you a spark of Henry's determination to leave the world better than we found it. And if you have found solace in these stories, know that more await you, so please subscribe to our channel, so that with every new video, we can share the richest tales and brightest insights together. Good night, and sweet dreams until we meet again.